Pip Tally-Ho Joolz guides here, in which I wander around London and tell you fascinating facts, which you may or may not know. I'm always saying the same thing. Today, we're in Spitalfields. It's called Spitalfields because in 1197, the priory, which was here, built one of the biggest hospitals in the whole of medieval England. And it was called the New Hospital of St. Mary without Bishopsgate. And Bishopsgate referred to one of the city gates. You used to have Bishopsgate, Ludgate, Newgate, and this one was without Bishopsgate as opposed to within Bishopsgate. So it's just outside the city walls, St. Mary Hospital or St. Mary Spital. And then from Spital, it became Spitalfields.
If you saw my little backyard, what a pretty spot you'd cry. It's a picture on a sunny summer day. With the turnip tops and cabbages, what people
down these stairs, there's actually a bit of the old monastery that still remains. I think it was in 1999, around then, they were doing some excavation around here and they discovered this old medieval priory. After the dissolution of the monasteries, Henry VIII closed down all these places, but they were doing some digging recently and they discovered this chapel built in about 1320.
She's squatting for a poo.
I don't know what she's doing.
She's tweaking his nipple. Hello, yeah.
Oh, hello. This is typical, by the way. Whenever you see these in London, they never work.
Those were the last people to use that lift.
The neighbours thinks I grows them and you'd fancy you're in Kent or at Epsom if you'd gaze into the muse.
Yeah, later on in the 17th century, there was something called the Edict of Nantes, and all these French Huguenot silk weavers came over to London. And they settled here outside the city walls because in the city, I think the livery companies had all these strict rules and everything about how you're supposed to do your business and silk weaving and what have you. So a lot of them settled around here and a lot of these in Fournier Street have been really well preserved and they're typical examples of the kinds of houses that these Huguenot silk weavers used to use. Did they have huge noses, the Huguenots? They were huge noses.
Do you know what I think they might be more interested in? It's the fact that this one's called number 11 and this one's called number 11 and a half. What do you think that's all about? It's like Harry Potter fever or something.
Now this one over here, number 14, this is where Queen Victoria's coronation gown was woven. Right in there. Amazing that, isn't it? Don't you think? Yeah, they're always doing filming around this area because it's very characterful and has these original buildings. And Gilbert and George live here, I think, one of these streets, and also Tracy Emin. So it's very popular these days with artists. Now these are excellent. Look, you don't get very many of these. This is a fire insurance plaque. In the old days, unless you had one of these, the fire brigade wouldn't come and put out your fire. So that's a kind of indication to the fire brigade, hey, I've paid my fire insurance, you can come and put my fire out. You don't get very many of them left. I knew about them, but I just didn't know there was one here. I was always trying to find one of those. That's excellent.
Very rare to find.
If you want a really good example of how these French silk weavers used to live, there's a place around the corner which I highly recommend. Down here in Fournier Street, around the corner from Spitalfields, is Dennis Seaver's house, and it is an excellent immersive experience worth a visit. He's set it up on the inside in the same way that it would have been in those days.
It's a wonder that the landlord doesn't want to raise the rent because we've got such knobby distant views.
Hello, welcome to Dennis Seaver's house. Please come in.
It really is a very pretty garden.
This is terrific.
Dennis Seaver's was the chap who lived here, and this was his home. And Dennis came to London in the 60s from California, and he rode around town in a 19th century landau carriage pulled by horses. So even before he arrived in this house, he was living an extraordinary life in London. And it was then for sale, so Dennis bought it for $18,000 and set about recreating an imagined life that could have happened within it. And every chamber you enter, the house alters slightly. Ordinarily, when you visit the house, you take a journey with the family. Late 17th century into the 19th century. The annual Christmas installation is set in the early 19th century.
It looks like everybody has simply put down their knives and forks because they've heard us coming.
That's the idea. Remember, the house belonged to Dennis Seaver's, and this was his home until he died. And Dennis took it to an extreme and lived like this.
He actually lived like this.
He did, yeah, like this.
Because you can actually hear horses and carriages going past, hawkers and peddlers, tinkers, menders of chairs. Black Swan.
The Black Swan arrived in the 19th century. And it also comes from that time when food was dressed and came straight back to the table to look as it did when it was alive. I greet you at the door. give you a short introduction, and then you silently take yourself through the house. That's the whole point of the silence in the house. Your experience is not interrupted by somebody taking a photograph or talking about something. I like to go to places where I can't photograph anything and I don't document everything, because then it means I really study and experience it.
This staircase in itself is tremendous. Mistletoe.
Do you know the whole point in the history of mistletoe? And remember, the whole point of Christmas is that you bring, in the dead of winter, towards the end of the year, you bring in something living, which brings you wealth and prosperity and good fortune for the coming year. So everything's dead, it's freezing cold. Within that white berry is a seed. The only people that traditionally kissed beneath that were people who were betrothed and were awaiting the birth of a baby or wanted a child. So when people kiss each other underneath that, the true meaning of it's lost. And the Victorians banned it because of its subject matter. Every chamber in the house is presented like a painting, and you step into a living canvas.
His coat is hanging on the wall, so it actually feels as if they've just departed the scene. You know, the chair is still on the floor that he's knocked over.
I'm going to take you up to meet Bob Cratchit and his family.
Oh, excellent. He used to live in Camden.
Well, they've taken up residence here for their
Wonderful.
Christmas installation, along with Ebenezer Scrooge.
This has got to be Tiny Tim's walking stick.
It
surely.
is, yeah, his crutches are next door.
Yeah, it's real Christmas pudding.
Yeah,
It smells like Christmas pudding.
Yeah, everything in the house is real. That's the most important thing. And then we have a layer of sound, and then there's the layer of smell. The paint up here is hundreds of years old. It's all 19th century, and then there's an 18th century layer that is exposing itself with time.
The fire is on, the candles are burning, the food is still on the table. I can imagine people having had a nice Christmas meal and gone to the other room for a sherry or something. Like my mum's underwear.
Yeah.
It's been a real pleasure. These streets, these cobbled streets, were put here by proper stonemasons. They weren't just any old Tom, Dick or Harry. Look how beautiful this is. This actually starts over here as a kind of one single stone, and then it kind of moves around as a kind of pattern, a kind of spiral, and it all spreads out from this one point, out in every direction. I think that's rather pleasing.
This was a district outside of the laws of the city. This street was laid out in 1197. It was the boundary of the medieval priory. These are medieval streets, and all of these streets are now protected. This is the only surviving terrace of 17th and 18th century houses, and we fought to save all of that, and we've won.
Oh, that's fantastic. Oh, well done.
Well, you're saying that's coming down too?
Yes.
That's really nice.
I know.
What's the matter with people?
They want to build this and this.
Oh yeah, Barat has got like a multi-screen surround sound Dolby in it.
Exactly.
I mean, people have walked through here for the last 800 years. That's what's so extraordinary. William Shakespeare lived up here. He walked down here. We've saved the warehouses, and the warehouses are so interesting because these were all weavers' houses from the 17th century. The people that those warehouses were bought for were the next generation of immigrants, and they were Jewish furriers. And all the hoppers that catch the rainwater have the Star of David on the top, and that's the only indication that the people that occupied them were Jews.
Were they running away from pogroms?
They were the Ashkenazis. They came from Eastern Europe in their tens of thousands, and they settled here.
And because the Huguenots no longer needed some of their chapels, they converted this chapel into a synagogue. And they brought with them bagels, salt beef sandwiches, and I heard that the first ever fish and chip shop in England was actually in Mile End in 1860, and it was a Jewish invention. But I've also heard that it was Portuguese, so I'm sure someone will tell me. Anyway, apparently it wasn't English.
With a ladder and some glasses, you could see to Hackney Marshes if it wasn't for the houses in between.
This church is Christ Church, designed by Nicholas Hawksmoor. In order to rival the 10 chapels which the Huguenots had built in the area, they decided to build a Protestant church here. I think that's why it's got 10 bells, because there were 10 Huguenot chapels around here. I might be mistaken, but this church has 10 bells in it, hence the name of the pub over there, the 10 Bells, where some of Jack the Ripper's victims allegedly drank. See my other amazing video about Jack the Ripper, featuring music by my sister Little Lost Glue. Now, there's a unique organ inside which has got something like over 3,000 pipes and plays a low G or something. It's the only one of its type, I think, in the whole of Europe. But anyway, it's from about 1735 or something. Apparently George Frederick Handel played on it. In 1638, King Charles I gave a licence for this to be used as a market. It's been a market here ever since. It's quite a nice place to come and get food, you know, on your lunch break.
And by clinging to the chimney, you see all the way to Wembley. If it wasn't for the houses in between.
Around 1539-ish. So the grounds around here got leased to the Fraternity of Artillery of Crossbows, Longbows and Handguns for 20 shillings a year. And it stayed like that for the next 300 years. And this area was used by the household artillery to practice their shooting and their longbow work and stuff. Fancy a drink? I'm so cold and tired. I've never been into this one. So let's have a drink.
There's the mushrooms in the dust hole with the cowcumbers so green.
Hiya.
It only wants a bit of hothouse glass. I wear this milkman's nightshirt and I sit outside all day like the ploughboy.
Cheers, everybody. Cheers, Louisa. Cheers. Thanks for watching. If you enjoy my videos, don't forget to hit the subscribe button. And if you want a private guided tour of London with moi, you can head over to my website, joolzguides.com, where you can find out more about me. And you can even throw me a donation if you like. And indeed, if you want a video made, then do get in touch as well. See you next time, folks. Cheers.
Cheers.
I got a rope and pulley, I'd enjoy the breeze more fully if it wasn't for the